Welcome to Monarchist Minute. I'm William Stout, your host, here with Vice Chancellor Clemens Magnolia and our guest of honor today, Mr. J.K. Bosserson. How are you today, sir?
I'm fine, thanks.
I didn't butcher the pronunciation of that again, did I?
It was fine.
Oh, sweet, I got it for once. So how are you today?
Great. It's a bit dark outside, but that's what comes with winter.
Oh, yeah. At your latitude, I bet it gets dark early. About what time is sunset?
Around 6 o'clock.
Oh, that's actually not that different from here in Ohio. Ours
But
is
we're
usually
losing we're losing around 5 minutes per day.
Oh, wow. That is a lot. Do you guys get to the point where you don't see sun certain days of winter, or not quite that north?
No, we're not quite that north,
Hmm.
but the least we have time between sunset and sunrise, or the other way around, sunrise to sunset is just below 6 hours.
So theoretically, you could have a normal work day and get up, get to work, not see the sun all day, and then leave and still not see the sun.
Yeah, we would see the sun during working hours, but we would go to work before the sun rises, and then we would leave work after sunset.
Mm.
And that would be a normal working day, not working overtime.
Alright, well, I guess I was just thinking in my terms, because I work in a factory, so I quite literally do not see the sun my entire workday, because indoors in massive building, so.
Oh, well, we have windows.
Oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Clements, how you been?
Yeah, I've been fine. Another day, another day. Mostly just school and then work and then of course um campaigning for the election as well.
This is your first time speaking with JK. Do you have any questions for him, or JK, do you have any questions for Clements?
I understand he's in school as a student.
A college or a uni as
Yeah.
y'all call it.
So what are you studying? What's your major, minor?
Just right now I'm just doing my general courses and then I'm gonna go for a political science degree.
Yeah, monarchist political scientist. We need those.
Yeah.
He's pretty active in his local Republican Party. He's been campaigning for them all fall.
Yeah, I've been going door knocking for about past month now. Usually once a week I go out and I door knock. Usually you get pretty good people. Every once in a while though you'll get the nut jobs, which has happened to me a few times. I've had sometimes people yell at me. Only twice have I had people yell at me, and only two times have I had 2 times each. I've had someone basically. No, 4 times have I had people slam the door in my face, not including the people yelling at me.
Oh,
Do
rude.
you
What
think Trump
happened?
will win?
Um, I am I'm not a betting man. I'll say that right now. I'm not a betting man, but I think as of right now, it is more likely that Trump will win.
It looks like it from the numbers on Real Clear Politics.
Yeah, I think he has a pretty. I mean, just looking at the data for the early voting, it's looking pretty bad for Kamala, especially in North Carolina. I'm a North Carolinian, and so far the data right now is showing that there's actually more Republicans going out to early vote than Democrats and independents, which is not a good sign for Kamala. But who knows what'll happen election day?
Yeah.
What was this thing with the operations secretary of the UK Labour Party sending out 100
Yep. To
staffers
like different some of
to
them are apparently are coming to North Carolina, and I'm telling you right now, if I ever see one, I'm be like, listen, with all due respect, get out. We don't want you here. Labor sucks. You suck. Your prime minister's an idiot. We don't want Kamala. Go away.
What is this about?
The
Labor Party.
the British Labour Party is sending 100 staffers to the United States to swing states to campaign for Kamala Harris.
They're allowed to do that?
I don't know. Seems like international election interference if you ask me, but who knows?
No. After years and years and years of Democrats ranting and raving about foreign interference in our elections and how Russia colluded to get Trump elected, suddenly it's okay to have British people come over and campaign for Kamala?
We need to defend democracy. This is the defense of democracy.
Oh
You just
my.
got to understand that we need to defend democracy by any means necessary.
I'm gonna call out the hypocrisy is what I'm going to do.
That means nothing.
what,
I mean,
what
didn't you see the clip just yesterday of Kamala at a rally? So yesterday at one of her rallies, I don't remember where it was though, but somebody yelled out "Christ is Lord," and she responded, "Oh, I think you're at the wrong rally."
people going to the US to contribute as campaign the campaign as uncompensated campaign contributors is okay with the election legislation as far as I know. But the issue here is that a foreign political party organizing, and from what I understand, it must include funding, paying for their expenses, travel expenses, housing, etc. And that's could be what makes it an issue.
That's the thing I see. Yeah.
Well, now that we've discussed our mess a little bit, how are things in Norway?
Oh, we have the past months we have had some issues with our house, with the second marriage of Princess Mirtha, and also some issues with the stepson of the crown princess. And support for monarchy in the opinion polls have dropped from the 80s to the 60s.
That's so stupid. I'm sorry. That seems so silly to me. Of all things, that's what it'd be.
Drop
Yeah,
that.
well, this stepson of the stepson of the crown prince, that's the son of the crown princess, has been involved in issues with the beating of his ex-girlfriends, etc., and narcotics cases, and connections with hard criminals. And it's been a big fuss about it in our media.
But the tabloids are
And-
having fun with it, aren't they?
Yeah. And also with the money bill, the main money bill, the media have emphasized that there's been set aside about $2 million for a sarcophagus for the king and queen. And some people have been making a lot of fuss about that. No, I don't. The rhetoric goes, "Oh, well, I don't get a coffin that expensive. Why should they?"
I mean, devil's advocate, that is a lot for a sarcophagus.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand it, but where's the funds coming from that? Is that from the public or is that the crown's own fundings?
That's from the taxpayers.
Okay, yeah.
Well, as for a matter of the stepson, given that he is a stepson, where does he sit in succession? How does that work?
He
Well, he
has
would sit
no
in
role
succession.
as he has no role in succession.
Yeah, stepson can't inherit.
Only
Okay.
legitimate offsprings of the crown prince can inherit the throne.
Right, well, then, my thoughts are if he can't inherit, there's no risk for him to become a major public figure or participate really in the royal family. Why is his existence causing. Well, we know why it's causing controversy, but it seems like he should be irrelevant to the rest of the activities of the royal family.
He has some sort of pseudo connection to the royal family. He's part of the pseudo royal family in some way. He's considered a part of the royal family, but not of the royal house. It's
Huh.
complicated.
No, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying it's like, yes, he's part of the royal family, but you can't pick your family, and what he's doing, what he did, doesn't necessarily represent him. Well, doesn't represent the rest of the royal family. It's like one bad apple doesn't need to spoil the pot. Or
You are right. I was opposed to this marriage back in 20 some years ago, 2001, I believe it was. And I didn't in any way attend the wedding. I went off to Stockholm that weekend for a bachelor's party.
oh, so how old is the stepson now?
Oh, it's 20 something.
So he's still rather young then.
27.
Hmm. So he would have been 2001, like,
4 years old.
yeah, when the marriage happened. So he would have at least grown up in the royal household. I guess that does make him look bad, but.
Yeah, and people start asking questions. Is this part of the environment that they grew up in? And what about Princess Ingrid?
Hmm.
Could she be influenced in some same way?
You would. I get those concerns, and those are valid concerns, and those are always concerns that come up in those situations, but you'd think, given how much the Norwegian royal family are public figures, that were something like that going on, it would have came out by now.
Yeah. But there's also these people saying that the media protect the royal family, so there are things that they know that they don't write about, talk about, and people start speculating whether there are things that they've kept shut about.
Yeah.
Mm. It's like that in the US too, albeit I will admit the US has much more reason for that sort of thing. Our politicians are much more prevalent for trying to cover up things. However, I've heard nothing but good things about Norwegian media and how free, open, and transparent it is. So,
Well, that's the so-called modified truth, you ask
mm.
me. But
Well, I imagine you'd know better, given that you are a journalist from Norway.
I do write, and but journalism has never been my profession. My things that I do for a living.
Mhm.
But I do a lot. I do a lot of things in the media on the
What
side.
has been what has been your experience with the media in Norway?
It's that they are very consensus oriented. It's there are they have a herd mentality.
Mhm.
There are exceptions, but that's my general impression.
The US is a lot like England in that we have very sensationalist media, regardless of how true the statements are and how factual the statements are. We tend to prioritize shock value and entertainment over actual factual information.
We have those tendencies here as well, unfortunately.
Half the battle with that probably is since that journalism is for profit, you gotta make things interesting in order to get people to buy your product.
Yeah, and when you do op-eds, you have to consider that as well. You have to see, is there some way I can do this in a sort of sensationalist way being without selling your soul too much.
I could never do it. I'd be the first to admit that. Clements, you have anything you'd like to add in, or
Not really. I mean, I've just been mostly looking over the just to switch off from royal politics and actually just normal politics. I know y'all in Norway ain't got your elections until next year, but I just went looking through y'all's polling, and I was shocked to see that the Labour Party has actually fallen to second place, which they haven't actually. The election were held right now, they would get second place, which hasn't happened since before the Second World War, right?
It's about 100 years.
Yeah. Well, I just it's just find it interesting to see how the right or conservative party in Norway is now beating
Oh,
them, and it's in
so
some
so
polls
called.
even having yeah, and in some polls even has the Progress Party in either beating the Labour Party and the Conservatives, or even just in second place or a close third.
Yeah, I've seen polls with the Progress Party in first place.
Yeah,
how
just
many
And
interesting to
parties?
see how
the
that's happened.
local election last year, I believe, was the first time the, it was the in 99 years the Labour Party did its worst election.
Dang.
How many parties does Norway have?
In Parliament, there are 9.
9. That's a
It's a
lot
Yeah,
more than I would
but
European
expect.
country. It's a European country. They got a lot of parties.
I know, but
yeah, we tend to call it all those parties together. We tend to call them the Parliament Party. So it's a single party with several wings, but it's one party.
uh so
The differences aren't that big, you know.
I
Yeah.
see. I was just shocked to hear 9 because I think you think in Norway it's a smaller country. I wouldn't think there'd be that many different parties and political organizations in a country that size, but I guess I'd
Have a
be wrong.
proportional system.
That
As well
helps.
as the fact that y'all also got a communist party too. Well, technically, sort of two: the socialist left and the Red Party.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's
The
probably like
Red Party was previously called the Workers' Communist Party. Then they
Oh
changed
yeah.
their name and they claim that Well, we're an entirely different party. It's maybe partly true, but not completely.
Yeah.
I wonder if
And
there's
they have this red star as logo, and it has these rounded off edges of the star. And I had this acquaintance or friend who said that I want to start a party called Brown. And then I want to, as a logo, I want a swastika with rounded off edges, corners.
Oh dang. Okay, that's pretty.
now. I'm curious
He,
if
he,
the
he
two
said
communist.
he says this as a joke, of course.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. I know that's pretty funny though. It's like, guys, I figured out perfect name, the Brown Party, and we're gonna do it this way, guys. It's gonna be great.
I think I finally figured out why fascists and Nazis love the color brown so much.
Why?
Because they're full of crap.
Exactly.
But anyway, I wonder if the reason there's two communist parties is because of an ideological split. Like in Canada, for example, there's two different communist parties, and the reason that is because one of them is Marxist Leninist and the other is Maoist. So I wonder if it's a similar situation in that regard, or because you see that actually frequently.
That's true.
There is another communist party in Norway, but they're not in parliament.
Hmm.
Mm.
And recently they changed the election legislation so that it's harder for people not in parliament or parties not in parliament to run for election.
Mm.
If
Um,
you're a registered party and you didn't receive at least 5,000 votes at the last parliamentary election, and to run in the entire country, you have to get 1% of the electorate to sign that it's okay for them to run.
You see, I don't
And
like that.
it has to be evenly distributed across the country. You can't just go to the capital and say, I get 40,000 people from the capital to sign. It has to be evenly distributed across the country. You have to get 1% in each district. So if I want to run, I have a party that I want to have to run in Oslo, and I have to get 1% of the electorate in Oslo to sign that it's okay for that party to run.
And you gotta go around to all the other regions too.
Yeah, and that 1%, they can't sign for other parties. They have to sign for that party only.
That sucks.
We got
And
similar.
that 1%, if the entire country was one district, then that 1% would be the equivalent of the amount of votes you needed to get one or two members of parliament.
You see, we got a similar bogus rules in the U.S. that the
Yeah,
bipartisan.
but then it depends on states, though, because certain states in the U.S. they actually have much more liberal laws on this, like Colorado, and I think Vermont now basically say, "Hey, you want to run? Okay, that's fine. You're good." I know Colorado does that, but then like for me in North Carolina, they're very stringent on who can become a party. And then very often they'll just leave you on the list and not take you off. Like the Constitution Party is still on our list in North Carolina that can run, even though they're basically been dead for about 10 years now.
I know. I'm just talking about like how when RFK Jr. was trying to get his campaign running, he had to file in each and every state, and each and every state had different rules.
I mean, that's also because he was an independent.
I know, it's just like, I'm just thinking to myself, it's like, for like, especially when it comes to federal elections, there should be just one registering entity in order to register with. You shouldn't
Yeah.
have to go through this huge, tiresome bureaucratic process to get registered in every state where all sorts of shenanigans and tomfoolery can happen to basically, for lack of better term, sabotage your campaign just by
Yeah.
denying it.
I heard that since RFK Jr. has withdrawn, he really doesn't want to run, at least not in battleground states. But then they won't let him withdraw. That's what
Oh yeah.
I understand.
He was able to withdraw from most states, but then some wouldn't let him withdraw. I think he's still on the ballot in Nevada, and that's about it. But and then some states have been purposely trying to kick people off the ballot. I remember I went to my county's Republican, the GOP meeting, and my representative, my state representative, he was touting to us about how they kicked off two people from the ballot. He was touting that to us. He was like, we were able to kick off a liberal candidate and a conservative candidate from the ballot.
Democracy, everyone. To quote Otto von Bismarck, laws and sausages share one thing in common, that they're most respected when you don't know how they are made.
There actually isn't proof that Otto von Bismarck actually said that.
But it is a
But
great quote.
it is attributed to him at least,
How?
how Edmund Burke has been attributed to say the only thing for for evil men to succeed is for good men to do nothing. There's no evidence he directly said that, but it's attributed to him still.
I thought that was Ben
Yeah,
Franklin
and
who said that.
No, Edmund Burke.
yeah, and there's this quote that's attributed to Winston Churchill that the best argument against
Democracy is a 15-minute conversation with the average, or a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Yeah.
yeah.
Wait, so he never
And
actually said that either?
yeah, and there's no evidence in the archives of Winston Churchill that he ever said that.
And who's coming up with all these great quotes that should really be getting the credit for them? That's my question.
Well, we don't know, but all we can say is it's attributed to them.
Hmm.
And this year, it's also the 140th anniversary of our first parliamentary government, our first parliamentary cabinet.
40 years in review. What we have to say.
Yeah, well, it hasn't been a big success. People think so, but government has been growing and separation of powers isn't what it used to be. Of course,
Speaking
it's a simplification that this appointment by King Oscar II of Johan Sverdrup as Prime Minister of Norway was what established parliamentarism in Norway. Of course, there's in history, historians, or at least those who have, say, sensationalists presentations, like to pinpoint things to single events, but of course, it's often more complicated than that. But the events of 1884 were important, but they didn't actually establish as such parliamentarism in Norway. It was a longer process.
Of course.
Well, while we're wrapping up on the topic of Parliament, I remembered us talking about us wanting to give a moment to talk about this. Let's hop away from the US and Norway and hop over to Starmer's current mess in the UK, shall we? Particularly in regards to his plans with the House of Lords.
Mr. Keir Stormtrooper.
There you go.
I will be the first to admit, I honestly had a little bit of hopes for him because, one of the first things they showed when he got elected was that he was watching a soccer game. And I even said on on our Twitter, it's like, well, there's one thing you can't say is that he's not English. Because at least he seemed culturally English, but was I wrong?
You act
Oh,
as
was I
you
wrong?
act as if the Labour Party will ever not elect a white man to be their leader.
Which is hilarious given how
I mean,
they. Oh,
technically, Margaret Beckett was their interim leader, but she was not the actual leader. But yeah, and it's hilarious that the Conservative
you cut out.
Party's gonna but how
I don't know who that is.
Margaret Kemi Badenoch well, her real name is Olukemi Olfulanto Agagoke Badenoch.
What ethnicity is that name supposed to be?
I believe she's Nigerian.
Can
That
we?
pronunciation was quite good, actually.
Thank you. Yeah, and she's going up against Robert Ginrick, who is actually an English guy, who said
Can
that
we?
who he has been quoted as to say, "Yes, I would vote for Trump."
Can we talk about the hilarity of Labour, the party of DEI in England, having some of the whitest people with the whitest sounding names running their party, whereas the party of traditional cultural and British values, the Tories, is currently the party that's ran with two non-white PMs back to back so far.
Not yet. They haven't elected their
Okay.
their leader yet, but it seems very likely that Badenoch is going to win.
Can we just talk about how hilarious that irony is, though?
It is quite funny.
But anyway,
Well,
how
politics runs in mysterious ways.
I think it goes into the old adage that oftentimes the minorities that progressives like to defend are oftentimes more conservative than the conservatives they race against, or something to that measure.
As Peter Hitchens has said, the Conservative Party is not conservative.
It's not.
And the same goes for Norway, by the way. But what about the House of Lords and this mandate that the Labour Party has for so-called reforming it with it was 34% support in the last general election?
Basically,
Oh,
by my understanding, it's been a running goal of the Labour Party for a while to get rid of the hereditary peers. That goes back to what's his name? He ended the troubles in Northern Ireland. I always forget his name.
Tony Blair.
Yeah, it goes back to Blair and all his antics.
And his
But
his House of Lords reform back in 1999.
As well as his basically almost shattering of the union by giving Scotland and Wales their own parliaments.
Blair and his consequences has been a disaster for the UK. It really has been, but yeah, getting rid of the hereditary peers goes all the way back to Mr. Tony Blair and basically what can be described as a soft abolition of the nobility and monarchy in UK by stripping it of any sort of relevance or power that it had left, and basically quietly abolishing the aristocracy with various removals of hereditary privilege and a horrifically high inheritance tax, which I think UK inheritance tax is 50%. Like when
Yep.
you die, you take half of all your assets.
Yeah, and then they claim when you had the change of the throne, were these Republicans just nagging about King Charles not paying any tax. The problem is, of course, the inheritance tax, not that the king was not paying it.
Honestly, I just think inheritance taxes it should be illegal. You shouldn't be able to tax money that someone already possesses because that's not earned income. They already paid taxes on all those assets. They already paid taxes on all those incomes. You shouldn't be able to tax frozen assets, basically.
Yeah, well, inheritance tax that just destroys the long-term thinking across generations.
Mhm. And if you're the kind of person who believes in the sort of, I guess you could say, postmodernist elite theory on how the elites are trying to destroy traditional values because it makes the world better for them, then you could say that's intentional. But I don't necessarily believe in that. I just mainly I try and follow the school of thought. Don't blame on malice what could be summed up as or deduced as ignorance or whatever the saying is.
Incompetence, whatever.
Yeah.
But back to the House of Lords, they haven't had anything but a suspensive veto since 1911.
Mm.
And since 1911, they've had an absolute veto in cases of prolonging the life of Parliament. So if there's an act of Parliament saying that no, we're not going to have the election after 5 years, we're postponing the election beyond those 5 years, and the House of Lords has an absolute veto. And in all of the cases, their veto is at best suspensive. And while you have that situation with such a weak power of the House of Lords, they're so obsessed with removing these hereditary peers. And my problem with democracy isn't that people aren't as skeptical of democracy as I am, because I can't expect people to be that. But my problem is this democracy maximalism. We
Democracy
know that
of democracy.
democracy maximalism. Even if we know that democracy is a bad form of government, but as Winston Churchill says, uh, the others are even worse, or at least that's the, um, the dominant view. And even then, they have to have maximum amount of democracy. Everything has to be as democratic as ever possible. And that's my problem with it.
Well, at this
If you recognize that democracy is a form of government that's is not so good, maybe you should have elements that that moderate that that um that somehow what to say just I forgot the word for it. Sorry.
counteract maybe.
Yeah, that could be it.
But I get what you're saying. That's exactly the reason why we have the Supreme Court in the US, but how quickly people forget that these institutions are undemocratic by design to fix the very flaws and holes in democracy. And I'm very much worried that now that the House of Lords will lose its hereditary peers, that it'll end up falling to the same issues that the Supreme Court does in the US, where it gets flooded with cronies and people pack the court with judges that agree with them, and people will pack the House of Lords with peers that agree with them, and party loyalists, old donors, lobbyists, all sorts of wonderful, wonderful people. And
Yeah,
it lose basically any sense of value that it once had.
you have these advocates for Supreme Court reform who say that we need to make sure that the Supreme Court is more in line with the values of the American people.
That's not the point of the Supreme Court. The point of the Supreme Court is to mediate on matters of the Constitution, and like it or not, that means it needs an unbiased view. It's not meant to pander to you, it's meant to do what is right. Sometimes it fails, yes, of course, it's human, but it also succeeds. And it succeeds marvelously when it does.
Yeah,
Anywho, should we wrap up, sir?
we were going to talk about the problems of bringing debate about the problems of democracy into public discourse.
Oh, yes, would you like to open that then?
Well, if we discuss democracy, then if we have someone saying that there's threats to democracy, democracy is in crisis. Donald Trump will end democracy. Then there are no problems bringing that into the public discourse and getting an audience that's interested in it. But if you say, hey, there's this and that problem with democracy, then interest doesn't seem to be that great. And why is that?
I think it's because we like to think of democracy as some sort of infallible idea. And that's why we paint Donald Trump as a threat to democracy rather than a problem of democracy that's gone awry. Because if we call him a threat to democracy, we can separate him from the democratic process. And therefore, we don't have to deal with the issue of him being a consequence of the system rather than a threat to the system.
I also think it has to do with this being presented as an existential threat. Democracy is and freedom is linked. They are linked. And democracy is what gives us freedom, liberty. And if there's a threat to democracy, there's a good likelihood that this democracy, this wonderful form of democracy, this wonderful society will end. And then it becomes something perceived as an existential threat. Whereas if you say there's this problem with democracy, there's that problem with democracy, you're more like presenting it as you want to fight for this lost cause. I mean, we decided that we want democracy 100 some years ago, and you want to bring this. You want a rerun of this battle, and we're not interested.
Right. In America, it's rather difficult because, of course, that's part of our national ethos. This idea that without democracy, we can't have freedom because, after the American Revolution, the Jeffersonians won, and they brought with them the more radical, revolutionary, Republican ideas that came about during the late 18th, early 19th centuries. And of course, Jefferson was in France during the Revolution, and he took much of that revolutionary fervor back home with him. But
Yeah, but it's pretty
it's
much the same in Norway as well. Democracy is the secular god.
it's I guess you could say it's just part of that greater French revolutionary idealism or post-revolutionary thought. And of course, trying to call out the god and say the emperor has no clothes has always been the prevailing challenge, and many have tried. Hoppe has tried, and many other philosophers, especially in the later part of the 19th century, tried, but it seems none of them ever stuck. Curious as to why that was. Why more critics to democracy never really kept relevance going into the latter part of the 20th century.
Well, policies, when you direct criticism against democracy itself, well, as I said, people aren't that interested. And when you criticize something, then that thing that you criticize, it itself is a problem. Whereas when you're discussing democracy, it's often that there are particular policies under democracy that's the problem, or particular phenomena under democracy that's a problem, but not democracy itself. Right? If you hate the expanding government that you've seen under democracy, the the problem that's more relevant to most people is big government, not the democracy itself becomes secondary in some way, as at least it's perceived by many people. So
And of
it's
course,
more urgent to take care of particular policies or particular phenomena such as election buying of votes in elections. And of course, when you have problems with mass immigration, that's perceived as a threat here and now that's more urgent. So there are lots of things that are more urgent than democracy is a form of government itself.
and of course, there's always a defensiveness to it. When you criticize democracy, you criticize the idea that that common person should have say in their government, and it's understandable then that the common person would be defensive about that. Be defensive about the idea of their right having power or in government being questioned. And I think maybe that's one of the things that makes democracy so successful, and that by giving power to the people, or at least giving the illusion of power to the people, it gives the people a vested interest in the democratic system. And so it's hard to convince people of the flaws of democracy because there's such a vested interest the people have in democracy, in the facade of electoral government.
And it's somehow, I don't know if you have this expression in America in English, kicking people kicking upwards or kicking downwards.
It might be the
When you criticize something, it's okay to kick downwards, to kick people who are not in leadership positions, etc. So it's not okay to kick people who are down the ladder, down way down in the hierarchy, whereas it's okay to kick people in top positions. So it's okay to criticize the king and the prime minister, But to criticize people who are doing their day-to-day things and don't have any particular leadership position, that's not so okay. People
But
who are laying down, who are already laying down.
and we do have a saying similar to that, don't kick a man while he's down, or to compare to kicking up or kicking down, we do have a similar colloquial in America, but ours is punching up or punching down. And usually in
Yeah,
America,
okay, so
yeah.
yeah,
But
so punching up is okay. Punching King Charles is okay. Punching your stormtrooper is okay, but punching ordinary electors, ordinary voters, that's not okay. So if you criticize democracy as such, and you criticize the ability for the average voter to actually take part in a meaningful way in the form of government, and that's punching down.
and that's probably has to do with the fact that, since they're public officials, we act as if they assume that being criticized, being ridiculed, and even being demeaned by the general public for things they do in office or for things going on in society is part of their job. Whereas we, the voter, when we vote, we basically give away our authority and power to those people. So, in a way, I guess you could say public officials and public figures are sacrificial lambs where they take all the criticism, all the pain, anger, and hatred over the things that are wrong from the world in exchange for us. They
Yeah,
take all our hate and anger so we don't have to deal with the consequences of our own action.
and when speaking of criticizing democracy, you it's easier to punch those public officials, those politicos that have been elected, to criticize them. Why should we criticize the system of democracy when we can criticize those politicians?
Right, and it goes back to what I said about Trump. It's okay to criticize a person, but as soon as we talk about that person in terms as being a product of the system, it's not okay because that would imply that there's something wrong with the system. But we need to admit that there's something wrong with the system that allowed such a person or such things to occur in the first place.
Yeah, Donald Trump is by and large a symptom of the problems of the American system. He wouldn't he wouldn't emerge if there weren't serious problems with American government.
And I'm not making the comparison that Trump is literally Hitler when I say this, but the same thing could be said about any number of dictators. Hitler was a manifestation of the problems with Weimar Germany. Mussolini was a manifestation of the problems with post-war Italy, and so on and so forth.
And also, Trump can't be literally Hitler because only Hitler can be literally Hitler.
Right, true. But that's the joke or the expression.
Yeah. I know lots of people use literally, not in meaning literally.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to think of the grammatical term. It's used as an explicitive, or what's the word I'm looking? I can't think of the exact grammatical term to define it, but in America we
Oh,
use it to place emphasis.
okay.
Something that came out in like the 80s or 70s, and that's when they started using it. So we just sort of use it as a term to express emphasis and be dramatic, basically.
Yeah. misuse of terms is not it's not something new. So how will America do going forward?
That depends on what happens in late. How many weeks do we still have? 1, 2, 3 weeks. 3 weeks
It's no
until the 5th.
it's November 5, right?
Always first Tuesday of November. Honestly,
It's the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, I believe.
I've always been told it's first Tuesday. I've never noticed it any other Tuesday but first Tuesday.
I think if November 1 is a Tuesday, it's on the November 8th
You might be
or
right.
November 8th.
It might be the first Tuesday of the first full week or the first full business week of November. You might be right there. But I'm not sure. Honestly, I've never paid attention enough onto the calendar to notice. I just know when the day is. And to be fair, I'm very much looking for it to come because I am, just for the simple fact that I'm sick and tired of seeing the ads. And they've been really aggressive this year, exceptionally, even for a presidential year.
Norwegian media, they simply more or less repeat propaganda that's from American media.
You're kidding.
And it's almost as if Norway was the 52nd district relevant to the electoral college. So Norwegian media have to say how bad Trump is so that they can convince Norwegian voters that Trump is bad so that Kamala Harris will win in the electoral college. It's absurd.
Put another tally mark on the board. Give another point to American cultural imperialism. Once again, we win, for better or worse. On behalf of all Americans, I apologize that you guys are importing our political nonsense. Because I gotta tell you, it's
Well,
not intentional.
but it is important who was in the White House for the rest of the world.
It is, unfortunately, despite what many Americans think. It is strange, America. We are both a very open yet very insular society. It's odd.
Yeah, it's open as to what is politically incorrect. There are these. Regnery has this series, Politically Incorrect Guides. I don't know if you're familiar with them,
I don't believe so, no.
but they have all these politically incorrect guides. Politically incorrect guide on American history, politically incorrect guide on the Civil War, etc. But of course, there's no politically incorrect guide on democracy, and there's no politically incorrect guide on King George III, because some things are too politically incorrect, even for Regnery.
Well, I forget who originally said this, but to repeat the quote, if the truth kills them, then let them die. Anywho, shall we wrap up, or do
Yeah,
you have any?
we could do that.
Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Anywho, those of you who are listening to this on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Those of you who are listening on Podbean or Spotify, follow us for more. Check us out on social media and on our website. If you want to help out the cause, join us on Discord or shoot us an email. Until next time, may God bless you and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you and goodbye.